Well, we are Nerds Indeed here on the Nerds of Nostalgia podcast, coming to you kind of live here from the coolest place to quarantine, that is Screenland Armor here in Kansas City, Missouri. Armor, how are all you quarantine crazies doing tonight?
Yeah!
Well, for those that may not know, my name is Greg D.
I'm Genius McGee.
And I'd like to welcome those watching on Patreon and those listening at home to our fourth Monday Mystery Movie Night here of 2020, where we're continuing our journey of watching movies that, to turn a phrase, it's been a while.
It's been a while. Been a long time since I rock and roll. Boy, I tell you what, it's been a minute, and I needed this movie. This movie, so fucking funny.
Well, quite honestly, we've actually, for the most part, of the four films that we've journeyed back to here this year, 3 of the 4 have been comedies, technically.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned, Genius, now more than ever, I think we need laughter.
We all need a good laugh. And this is a goddamn classic.
It is beyond a classic. We are talking of the 1988 classic, From the Files of Police Squad, The Naked Gun.
This movie has been with me forever. I saw this movie in the theater, and I laughed so hard.
We're going to get to our history of it, but ultimately one thing I do want to mention, I mentioned Patreon here, and this is actually being funneled, if you will, through a couple of places. Obviously here you're hearing this on our main Nerds and Nostalgia feed, but this is also part of our little deal here, our meddling.
What's your deal? Well, we'll tell you.
I should say our interactions with Screenland, as we are doing this, part of this through Screenland's Patreon.
Yeah.
Go to patreon.com/Screenland.
Because Screenland's always been good to us.
Oh, of course.
We figure we can be good to them.
And quite
And
honestly,
we're glad that you guys are being good to them, too.
and where do we normally do this live from?
Yeah, from beautiful Tapcade.
Absolutely. Now, that being said, ultimately, if you want to get really part of the Nerds experience, the nerd experience at home.
Fry yourself some deep fried Oreos. Get you one of those blue glasses that you know you have about 12 of.
Oh, absolutely. The entirety. And we're talking the custom pre-show, the trailers, our custom intro that we put together.
You're getting a taste of what we normally do live via your house.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can do that again at patreon.com/Screenland. And there are so many other just wonderful content that they are providing there. Commentary tracks, discussions with filmmakers. Honestly, better content that we're providing. So honestly, we're the lower tier.
But if you
much
feel
better
like
stuff.
slumming it, we have some stuff down there on their Patreon too. Like we did our Wolf Cop and One Cut of the Dead show there. So
The Shutter Shout-Out double feature that we're putting together. Well, number one, it's just good to be able to kind of get in this environment again. Ultimately, even if we're not,
weird sense of normalcy.
we have to find any little bit that we can
And
right
we're
now.
getting normal with a movie that's so absurd.
A movie that is, honestly, in my notes, it's a celebration of the absurd and silliness.
Yeah.
I would almost argue that it's kind of like American Monty Python in that embrace of the absurdity.
This is a live action cartoon. This is what that is. This is Looney Tunes, like on a budget.
So from the Files of Police Squad, we have The Naked Gun, which was released in the year of our Lord, 1988. Genius, you said you saw this in the theater. I, too, saw this in the theater, which begs the question, what was wrong with our parents? Number one.
Because this movie, I mean, it's PG-13, so you're like, oh, yeah, it's okay. But it's ridiculous. And some of the adult jokes, I think you have to be an adult to get. I mean, like, or a very advanced child, an ornery kid. If you're an ornery kid, you're going to get the jokes too.
I was all of 12 years old when I saw this movie, and like you said, there were a number of jokes that I had. The nice beaver joke.
Nice beaver. That was one of the, like, nice beaver. Thank you. I just had it stuffed, and she pulls down this beaver.
I thought that was the joke. I wasn't until I was probably in my late 30s that I
was like,
finally realized,
oh,
pretty sneaky. Well, this comes from the wonderful comedy team of the Zucker and Abrams, which, if you know comedy, especially if you're thinking like late 70s, early 80s, they were all over the comedy landscape.
Yeah, Airplane, name a few. The new Karaoke. A movie that we cannot show, but we would like to. No, I would like to. Kentucky Fried Movie.
on the Mount Rushmore of just absurd comedies. I would even throw out Top Secret as another one that I don't
Yes.
think a lot of people are familiar with.
No, and it's hilarious.
It's-
It's so fucking funny with Val Kilmer being crazy. Yeah.
But ultimately, it comes from that long line of throwing out just a million jokes, one at a just not one at a time.
Levels and layers of jokes that come back again, running jokes and like inside jokes and like outside jokes, just jokes. This movie is just jokes.
It's non-stop jokes, and I honestly think it's probably been at least 5 to 10 years since I've. Because honestly, I have to think in terms now, kind of like, did I watch this when I was married? Did I watch it before or after? And then because that's a good 10+ year window now. I'm like, oh, if it's before that, it's been a while.
Yeah, it's been about 10 years since I've seen this movie. But the weird thing about it is it's been 10 years, but as soon as the movie started playing, I started picking up on I remembered some of the jokes. Some that I like forgot about, which made me even bigger giggle, but like everywhere I go, something reminds me of her. And then it's just like it's just comfort giggles.
And that's just it. I go back to our PCU episode that we did when we talked about how a lot of times those movies that you're very familiar with and you grew up with.
And Jeremy Piven's real hair.
Oh, hey, and trust me, as someone that is losing his going, trust me, I can't say anything on that. But ultimately, no, I fell into the same rhythms as well, where you're anticipating jokes and they hit. But like you said, I forgot how many that I totally forgot about that I'm like, oh, that's in there. But my biggest question is, again, we hold this one in esteem, and I don't know if it's necessarily if I have bias for this film, but because it's so near and dear, like I said, it's kind of that warm pressure blanket, the comfort blanket for the most part.
Right.
I'm curious how first-timers, anyone out there watching it for the first time, how you reacted to it, because there's some very specific, like, of 1988 gags in there.
A lot of it's very 80s, very time capsule 80s with like the Ayatollah and like Gorbachev coming out the gate.
The entire gag with Gorbachev in there.
I knew it.
Okay, my apologies right now. The entirety of this podcast is probably going to be us quoting the entirety of the film, which I'm going to try to keep from. But it's almost a task, an impossibility to not just start overly quoting this film.
But it's weird, like you were saying. I wonder if people who are watching this the first time get it. I mean, I think with a lot of, especially with the physicality, yes, because it is a physical joke. But the Zuckers and Abrams, they have an interesting comedy history. Either you love them or you hate them. There's really no like mid ground with Airplane. There's no mid ground with Naked Gun.
Would you say they're basically kind of litmus test filmmakers for the most part, where
To see what your humor lies, yeah.
if you enjoy Airplane, if you get a kick out of Kentucky Fried Movie, we're probably we're gonna enjoy each other's company.
Surely you can't be serious all the time.
Always serious and don't. That's the stuff I'm talking about. That is interweaved in everyone's DNA. Popular consciousness. People that have never watched Airplane are familiar with that
the Shirley
joke.
line, yeah.
I guarantee people that have never seen Naked Gun, there's bits and pieces that they're familiar with, or even if they're not familiar with it.
Well, like even nowadays, I saw this GIF of a GIF. It's computer speak for you kids. I saw a GIF of that said "Love During the Quarantine," and it had that snippet of them like in big giant condoms going at it. So like, I guess it's still prescient.
And you have to understand, in that time especially,
Condoms were like almost a brand new thing. It was like use safe sex,
and especially within the AIDS crisis. So you have an absurd, silly film that is actually able to make a comment in a very funny way, because I saw this movie at 12 years old.
I didn't get it. I didn't get that joke.
I had permissive parents. I didn't know what a profo was. I had heard. I was raised on Revenge of the Nerds. There's that whole rubbers. What do we need rubbers for? I still didn't make the connection because I didn't think that was a thing.
Right. Yeah. And I was 10, and so I was like, I guess that's funny.
But I guarantee you, the sight of people in that kind of thing still looks weird.
Mm-hmm.
There's still, something is off with that it's not normal.
No, it's
like,
not normal. You're not supposed to have a giant body condom with the reservoir tip at the head.
And if that is normal in your household, that's cool. You probably had more progressive folks than I did.
But I'm not coming over for dinner. Let me slip into something more comfortable.
The gag of "let me slip into something more comfortable"
ridiculous.
And then he comes out in just a better suit. Okay, so half this podcast as well is going to me explaining why these things are so freaking funny.
If you don't get the joke, you're gonna get it. You're gonna learn today. No, but like I think why this movie holds up is because it balances the absurd humor, but with the cop trope movies of the '80s. I mean, it does a good job of those.
A lot of the cast are playing like they are in a real cop film.
Yeah.
While everything else around them is a cartoon. This is a film that spawned a franchise.
Yes.
Ultimately, it's a film that I guarantee was the entry point and introduction for many a people to the late, great Leslie Nielsen.
Oh man, absolutely. Leslie Nielsen has a one-way ticket to my funny bone. Like, there's some of his movies that I will die on that hill. He is hilarious.
I guarantee you, and it's what's really funny is the fact that if a lot of people will eventually reverse engineer with his career,
right?
And the closest thing that I can say we have to a modern day Leslie Nielsen, and I'll go to my grave saying this as well, is once John Hamm starts getting the gray and the white in his hair.
I was thinking that during this watch because he talks sometimes very deep and gravitas like that, and I was like, John Hamm could totally be a Leslie Nielsen.
A few years from now, maybe that's the Naked Gun reboot that we need.
Mm-hmm.
Is him,
oh yeah, because
Lieutenant Frank Drebin.
Uh-huh.
Well, and that's also the other thing too. If you go back and you look at early Leslie Nielsen, late Leslie Nielsen, that dude was handsome as all get out.
He was like a '50s B-movie star. He had the chiseled look and everything.
He still had the chiseled look.
Yeah, he did. Did you ever see the show that this was? Did you ever see Police Squad?
And actually, if anyone then was a part of the Patreon and part of the pre-show, yes, actually, I put together the pilot episode. It's legit funny because
real funny.
It's the same thing you're getting in the movie.
It's the gags. It's the same gags.
A little less risque.
Mm-hmm.
No assault with a concrete dildo. Totally forgot about that part.
Yeah.
Holy smokes.
When he's trying to get up on the ledge, he's like, ah. Right? So, interesting thing about that. I remember vividly watching this edited on like Channel 5, okay? They edited that entire scene out.
I can imagine.
With the honk, and then when he makes the penis go up, and then you just see that like look of that smile on the fucking statue's face, and he comes up. They edited that entire like scene out of the TV version, but what's weird is they added more scenes of the Queen when he's like sliding on there, because there's a deleted scene when he's sliding on the Queen on the table where he's trying to get up, but he keeps slipping, and so he's like, and he falls over, and her leg is up in the air like that. There's like a whole nother montage of that they added into the edited version, but they took out the like cement dong.
I think there's probably I'm sure the censors had an issue with the cement dong and the fact that it does go from kind of flaccid to up. And the fact that there are sound effects involved in this film that, again, so juvenile that the 12-year-old Greg loved it. Let me tell you, 43-year-old Greg loved it.
Loved it.
And that's just it. I think this movie held up really well. The gags weirdly enough, you would think that there were certain things that may have aged it back in 1988. One of the gags that I think ultimately when I saw it initially, I'm like, that's not going to hold up 5 years from now. Weird Al.
Yeah.
Weird Al, more relevant now in 2020. I'm like, oh my God.
They're not here for you, they're for Weird Al. And here comes Weird Al, and everyone's like, yay! I mean, and they would still do that. But the scene, now, I think it's been copied so many more times of when you take a microphone into the bathroom, but I don't think it's been done to perfection as it's done in this movie.
And given now the advent with Zoom meetings now, with everyone being more personal at home, I am so afraid now that my mic won't be muted or anything, and I have to run to the restroom, that people are going to hear that now. And let's face it, peeing is funny, farting is funny. Leslie Nielsen carried around a fart machine constantly whenever he'd go on set. I believe on his tombstone is a fart joke. Like, he was someone that he understood everything. He kind of embraced what he was, because in almost every film that he's in, he's the straight man.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, starting with like Airplane into Dracula Dead and Loving It, all those later esque films that we'll get to eventually.
But he was a master at being so deadpan and serious when telling something goofy. Like one of the jokes that I love, and every now and then I'll like sprinkle it. Then it's like drinking a whole lot of Drano. Sure, it'll clean you out, but leave you hollow inside. And it's something like but he said it's so serious with such conviction, you can't help but laugh.
I could hear freaking Tom Atkins in Night of the Creeps say that line, and you'd get the same effect because it's a hard-boiled noir flick.
Yeah.
And, someone that likes it very hot.
And awfully
wet. Now, let me just say this. Ultimately, again, I saw this in 1988 in the theater.
Has the kind of legs you want to suck on for a day.
The year before was the first time, and it was a home viewing because I didn't see it in the theater, but I saw the movie Platoon for the first time. Now, let me paint you a real quick picture. Again, permissive parents. We had HBO, I had cable. We called that cultural currency back in the day. The first time I ever watched Platoon, I am up in my room. I've got just everything wrapped around me, blankets, quilts, and I'm freaking out. I am terrified of this movie, especially
It's a war horror movie.
the last scene when that final siege happens. I don't know if I've been that afraid of with a horror movie, but I was petrified of this. So when that montage kicks up with
something tells me I'm into something good.
When it culminates in this great shot where it raises up, they're walking out of the theater hand in hand laughing.
Everybody behind him's like freaking out.
And you get to the placard and it's Platoon. Even as a kid, there was something that immediately I'm like, that's amazing, because I had my own personal experience. I was still dealing with the PTSD from that Platoon viewing, and I was like, humor helps.
Frank Drebin helps out.
Humor and horror, they serve the same purpose.
Mm-hmm.
You might get to the same result differently, but you're going to get the same result.
I'll tell you what, there was 3 instances where I laughed almost uncontrollably in this movie, and 2 of them were for asinine reasons. The first one,
Lay them on me.
The first one, when he's in the bad guy's office, he's like, bingo. And he pulls out a bingo card. That was the stupidest fucking thing, and I loved it so much, because it was so dumb.
It's literal.
Yeah, it's absurd.
And sometimes they do literal in the best of ways. In Airplane, they say something along the lines, the shit's really going to hit the fan.
And then they see shit hitting the fan.
Quite literally.
Another thing that got me was like, I don't like him. I like cops. And then everybody's like, hey. And that one tickled me. But from the beginning of it to the end of it, the chase scene, the car chase scene, just got me. Every single beat, every single way. Now, Stephanie, extend your arm. Extend your middle finger, and then the double take. It was the double take of the trucker. He's like,
driver. Also, then Stephanie gives it a 1 and a 2. She gives a little 1-2.
Go for it, Stephanie.
Go for it, Stephanie.
Ah!
Now, it should be noted, Stephanie also has a brief part in what we call goes from a boner jam to a bummer jam. Last American Virgin.
Yeah, that's right. And then that guy, the driver instructor, he's been on everything. He was in Ghost Story. He had a bunch of commercials in the 80s. He's got that British voice.
This film is filled with those kind of character actors, and that's what makes this film so much funnier.
You know what else who you see out of nowhere? Francis.
Hey!
It's Enrico Palazzo! Every time we talk about Francis, it's Enrico Palazzo, because it's Francis from Pee-wee's Big Adventure showing up at the Empire game. And random Wendy Newman songs playing in the background.
I love LA. We'll get to all of that ultimately, but that's the best part, is the fact that you have someone like Francis that has the smallest bit part, but it's still the bit part that we talk about to this day.
It's Enrico Palazzo.
And it's not even so much that it's Enrico Palazzo, it's the fact that it's Francis.
Talking about Enrico Palazzo.
That's the beauty of this film. I'm not going to say it's the inception of comedies, but it offers so many things. The visual gags, the subtle, the homonym gags that they throw in there. I'll go as far as when they go to the tech lab and he's looking in the thing, he's like, I can't see a thing. Use your open eye.
Or I don't know why, but it gets me every time. You have something on your side of your mouth. No, the other side. Blunk. And just this splotch of banana just on the ground. Just no reason whatsoever.
The sight gags are wonderful. Again, humor that works when you're a kid is always a good thing. But now as an adult, some of that stuff I appreciate so much more.
Yeah. It needs to be not 10 years since I see this movie again.
Oh, no, completely. Now, here's the other question. How long has it been since you've seen any of the sequels?
Even longer. I remember thinking 2.5 was all right and 3 wasn't as funny, but I thought that's been plus 10 plus years.
Shouldn't you mean 2.5
And 33 and a third. With Anna Nicole Smith and Fred Ward.
Oh, that's right. He's the main bad guy in there.
Guy.
And Goulet, I believe,
is in part 2. Red Ships of Spurn.
And if you're going to go for a bad guy in the mid 80s, the late 80s,
the precursor to Antonio Banderas, but Ricardo Montalban, The Plane, from Fantasy Island, and The Wrath of Khan.
Oh, now we definitely have to add a little bit to the Patreon tier for that. Ultimately, if you get Khan in your movie as the bad guy,
Khan,
he is golden in this film.
Tell me, Mr. Pap Smear. Just like
I must kill
Pap Smear. Why? Why would you name your character Pap Smear for no reason other than a funny name?
Other than, again, for 12-year-old Greg not to laugh, but for 43-year-old Greg, he laughs even harder, going, "Oh, goddamn Pap Smear." But the good secretary is hard to find.
Yes, but anybody
can be an assassin.
I bought this fish. This pen was a gift from Emperor Hirohito. It's just like the way he says it.
Gravitas.
Yeah.
Again, he is in a very serious film.
Those fish, deadly, elegant.
He's a Bond villain, but he's got Frank Drebin as his foil. And the fact that Frank Drebin then, systematically destroys.
When he's at the meeting and he goes to the dinner table and he goes, Drebin. And she goes, Frank. And he goes, you're both right.
Correct. It's, again, ridiculous. As a 12-year-old, I didn't understand how funny it was for Frank Drebin to say, and by the way, I faked every orgasm. What's it? Mom, Dad, what's probably the same time the year later I would ask, what's an enema? Thanks to Batman. The Naked Gun led probably me to ask, what's an orgasm?
A drink.
A drink. That's fair. For me, everything builds into one of my favorite all-time set pieces when we get to the final confrontation with the Queen at the ball game.
Mm-hmm.
There are so many... Honestly, let's hear it for that Queen, ladies and gentlemen. When she throws the first pitch and then she does it's, again, absurd, silly. The fact that... oh, my God.
George Kennedy
is eating throughout the entirety
cakes and then the pistachios and the whole big thing of pistachios.
I think Brad Pitt's character from the Ocean's universe took a lot of influence from
George
this.
Kennedy, because he's eating hot dogs, drinking beer, eating a fucking cake.
It's ridiculous. I love LA. Let's get to it. This is probably my first experience.
Joanne Newman, me too.
And it wasn't bad. Honestly, I can't hear that song without thinking of this montage that happened. I didn't realize there were a number of montages in this films.
There was a lot of montages. Like there was the day montage, the thing montage. There was the...
We've got multiple within the ball game itself. A couple of things I have to note. Number one, the escalation of the initial strikeout. When we get the first pitch that comes in, silence. Everyone views in, and he just goes, strike.
Yeah!
Then you see him turn around and react to everyone getting into it. Yeah! The next shot, when you see him getting more and more excited, and then finally yelling the strike before the pitch.
Strike 3!
It does his little thing. That, to me, was beautiful. Again, the escalation... The funny in threes that I found in this film, going to the sports bloopers, because you got the weird escalation of blooper, a guy
Something
sliding into
goofy.
second, and then a tiger mauling him.
And then blooper, and a guy losing his head.
How about that?
Yeah,
All the other sports reaction. But then ultimately, the fact that Frank Drebin infiltrates the field first as Enrico Palazzo, and the slaughtering of the national anthem.
Oh, the ramparts. It's like,
That we still had a prayer. Every little bit of that. And then the fact that you see the reaction shots of one Enrico Palazzo, just being tarnished and destroyed.
and then he's all pissed off. And the next thing you know, Frank Drebin goes back and he's got him tied up. And like, sorry, gentlemen. And then
I didn't think I had to give another time
another place.
warning on this film because it's. Would you call that casual homophobia, or was that more kind of no? Hey,
Awkward situation. It's
Hey,
more of an
my bad.
awkward situation because, like, no matter, like, I'm cool with everybody, but if I walk into a building and all of a sudden some guy's tied up and the other guy's taking off his clothes, I'm like, I'm gonna leave you guys.
not kink shaming.
You know?
We're all
Nope,
cool here.
Nope, not at all. It's just like, okay, go. This ain't my room, and so just move on. Another time, another place. We definitely got. Let's talk about the murderous elephant in the room, shall we?
Wow. I was going to say murderous bronco, but yeah, elephant works as well.
Oh, out of all the entire cast, this is a great movie and everything is wonderful, but one of these people have been charged with murder in this cast.
Wow, that's it, it definitely puts a different spin on the film because back then, again in 1988,
Odendahl was the hero. He was like the juice. He was like, oh, it's O.J. Simpson doing Amos commercials.
he was T.D. Parker from First and 10 from the HBO series.
Yeah, and now he's like a convicted. No, not convicted. Yeah,
It's just he's Orenthal James Simpson. It definitely makes it weird, but
it does make it better seeing the shit getting kicked out.
yes, because as you see throughout the entirety, Nordberg is the put upon torture victim throughout the entirety of this franchise, which does that make the medicine go down a little bit
Does
easier.
make the medicine go down a lot
Okay,
easier. Because
that's
if OJ
fair.
was the hero, you'd be like, man, fuck this movie. But the fact that he's getting bear traps and he's getting wet paint and then he's getting his ass full of Leslie Nielsen, you know, and just like and everything happening to him, like it makes like, okay, cool, you know, karma's a bitch.
The throwing of a pillow and making it
Just
again so stupid, silly, and absurd. But no, ultimately for me it doesn't necessarily take me out because like you said, ultimately there's a lot of comeuppance that ultimately happens even
Yeah.
at the end when he comes out of everything. Bring! Everyone should have a friend like you, genius. Chekhov's pshoom,
there was Chekhov's cufflink, there was Chekhov's player piano, there was
and the fact that the ultimate comeuppance of the villain, not only is he stunned, falls over, but then just the fact that he's then steamrolled.
and then
and
a
then the
marching
band.
band comes over him.
And then ultimately, my dad went the same,
Same
way.
way.
I know. Ba ba bum, ba ba. Again, little musical cues that I cannot think of. And then I'm just again all the things that are just coming back to me that I think that are just funny and ridiculous. The fact that Leslie Nielsen is a Canadian treasure. He is someone that I don't think we were fortunate enough to really have, and one of those artists that I don't think we really truly appreciate now.
I think he's overlooked because like he made so many comedies and not every one of them were great.
We'll talk a little bit more about that because
But-
I tried to celebrate all of his catalog, but you know some of it's better than others.
But this one is definitely one of his crown jewels in his not only comedy repertoire but like his movie
Oh, absolutely.
filmography.
Like you said, I'm upset that it took me this long to get back to the movie.
Yeah.
But now let me tell you, more than ever, we need a laugh. And this is a great movie to laugh along
Yes,
with.
this is guaranteed to make you giggle. I think if you didn't at least giggle or smile or chuckle once in this movie, you need to make sure you're
Check your
still
pulse.
alive, because this movie's got, even if this is not your brand of humor, you have to find something funny about this movie because it's just so fucking funny.
And I almost call it like a comedy anthology because if you don't like it, just keep watching.
There'll be
They
more
throw
jokes,
so
more jokes.
many jokes, which I think also makes this so much more rewatchable.
Mm-hmm.
Because as ultimately, when you're laughing at something, you're missing something,
Yeah.
and that's the beauty of a comedy like
Oh,
this.
yeah.
Why
Oh,
we
yeah.
keep coming back to it. So
I got a message for you. Pop, 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 pop. You'll have to stop shooting. I can't hear you when you're shooting your gun.
again, a celebration of the absurd, which is why I don't put them on par with the Monty Python school, but in terms of the sensibilities and I think in terms of their overall philosophy and what they were going for.
Yeah.
And if we are being honest, if it's an American version of something, I'm not going to say it's dumbed down and sugar filled, but you know, potentially.
Yeah, definitely. there was some wordplay, but it's mostly on the physical and absurd as opposed to like. I mean, it's their snappy dialogue, but
Yeah.
it's not like that was quite the humorous job and the very funny Bob and Bib.
But you can throw a lot of their stuff with the Ministry of Silly Walks, and I think it'll still work.
Yeah, I think the Abrams and the Zuckers are American comedy treasures.
Absolutely, especially that early time there.
Yeah.
Not saying what their views are now, what have you. But final thoughts on The Naked Gun before we go to a few of our talking points.
I kind of want to see the other two now, see how they held up. I haven't seen them in a long time. I don't think they're gonna hold up as much as this one because I don't think so. I think you're definitely at a higher, but I think there is a joke in part 2 that I always remember, and it's the one where they're at the sex shop, and he goes, "This isn't sort of bust," and he goes, "Yes, it's real impressive." And then next thing you know, you just see that one always stuck with me because even at that age, I knew that was extremely dirty and extremely not possible, and so like I was like, oh. And so
I'm thinking of your like young, burgeoning sexual awakening that was triggered between this and like Night of the Demons, and how it just totally threw you off the path.
It's like I'm telling you, man. Between this and the FMKs, there's definite like signposts, and like
There's a profile out there.
There's a map to my madness. So,
Well,
and
let's-
it all goes. We didn't talk about that. Okay, so we talked about this before. There needs to be a horror version of like of that where you see them like going through like Haddonfield, and then you're and it's on like Billy's tricycle,
Well,
or
what's-
you're in the Overlook.
What's funny, and just the Pavlovian thing that it is, if you go back to our Nightmare Junkhead Friday the 13th Part 5 commentary, there's a moment where you get that vision, and we both immediately started going,
I mean,
it is triggered. And the fact that in the sequels, they start taking you, like you go down the channels of the Death Star eventually.
Yeah.
So I like to think, we talked, and going back to Night of the Creeps, that you could do like a weird shared Night of the Creeps universe. I think you could potentially throw Frank Drebin meets the Universal Monsters. Frank Drebin versus the Monster Squad. Frank Drebin versus Tucker and Dale. Like throwing all of those in there with John Hamm as Frank Drebin.
I would love to see that because John Hamm is already hilarious. Now I was thinking who other kind of cops could like be Drebin-y, and I would think Christopher Maloney, but I don't think he has the comedy chops.
Definitely.
But I don't think he has that, like, he's more intense. Not so much stoic like a Frank Drebin.
That's fair. Just
know?
wait till you get some later SVU, my friend. You'll get to that. But we do have a few talking points here. So the first one ultimately is, what is a favorite Leslie Nielsen role?
Ooh, aside from this one,
You can throw Naked Gun if you want.
I'll tell you what, man. One of the Leslie Nielsen roles that I absolutely love, because when I saw it, I didn't think that it would be as serious as it was, and that's one of my favorite movies, Creepshow. Like, I can hold my breath for a long. There was nothing funny about that segment. And I was expecting with Ted Danson and with Leslie Nielsen, because you expect, when you see Leslie Nielsen, you expect, like, oh, he's going to do something funny. Like, he's going to fall in the sand, or, like, he's going to electrocute himself with his own, like, camera in the ocean, you know? But no, he's mean and scary in this. And, like, yeah, he gets a good comeuppance. But at the same time, I'm waiting for, like, so
That, and I'm going to also say Creepshow. That's my answer, because of the fact that it goes against what I was not prepared for with my Leslie Nielsen. In fact, I'm pretty sure, I mentioned, we kind of joked that Naked Gun was probably our first exposure to him. I know I saw Creepshow before I saw The Naked Gun. So I guarantee you, my first impression was, guarantee you though, that I didn't make that connection because it is so different.
right.
And he's, you know what? He's all about value and cable, making sure you're up to date with the technology, making sure we've got a good stream. Who knows? He might be critical of us on this one. It's hard to say. But that does lead us to the second one. What's a favorite spoof movie outside of The Naked Gun for you? We ask the tough questions here.
There's a lot of good spoof movies out there, and like, but there's a lot of not good spoof movies.
That's
out
the
there.
problem, is I think there's sometimes an oversaturation of a lot of those things,
I'm
because
gonna go with Kentucky Fried. I mean, like, because it's a spoof on all these old TV shows and things that I grew up with, and like, and it's just so ridiculously funny.
it's got Big Jim Slade.
Yeah.
I mean, it's got everything. If you have not seen the Kentucky Fried Movie, This comes totally with Another Time.
Another place.
Warning.
This
Holy
It's
moly.
an offensive movie. It's very offensive, but it's kind of a movie that offends everybody.
Yeah,
And
well,
so,
that's the thing, that they were very much careful in those early days. They would shred anyone.
yeah.
Like, it didn't matter your sensibilities. If you were offended, they were probably doing their job right.
Black, white, left, right.
Everyone got it.
Everyone got it.
And maybe
so-
that's why I enjoy it so much, is the fact that they're not necessarily punching down. They're just kind of punching all over
Yeah,
for
they're
the
just
most part.
swinging wildly. There's no real agenda, but just to like But it's so fucking funny. Some of the jokes, I mean,
Oh, to this day, I still enjoy. The one I'm going to throw my hat in for is Top Secret. You get young Val Kilmer, and this is young, charismatic Val Kilmer.
Elvis impersonating Val Kilmer,
Oh, this is
fighting Nazis.
Yeah, the underwater scene. One of my all-time favorite sight gags come from a forced perspective sight gag with a telephone. It is ridiculous. It's more clever than you remember, ultimately, and I think it's one of those that gets lost in the pantheon.
I think so.
Loaded Weapon is another really
Loaded
good
Weapon
one.
is a good one. Give me a name. When your mother's supposed to do that? Fucking John Lovett's coming now. Nothing.
And I should say today is the great Tim Curry's birthday. As a wilderness girl.
Loaded Weapon, man. Him is the bad guy in that one.
Quite good. Quite
Yeah,
good.
But that's another one that I'll throw in because I've come to your door and I've knocked and waited for you to look in the peephole. Wilderness girl.
That's why I got rid of the peephole, my friend. Now, ultimately, this is the part of the show that we kind of like to say we're classing things up a bit.
We're gonna practice safe sex.
Yes, we are.
Do 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 do.
Tradition says we do that. We know this thing wasn't funny 20 years ago when people were doing it. We know it's not funny now when we're doing it, but again, it is a tradition.
And don't forget, we're gonna be asking you your FMK during the live stream. Now, while
Oh,
this is
yeah.
already over, I probably already asked you, but
And those answers are,
logged
for about 5
cataloged,
years.
and
Yeah, indeed. But
I'm
the
gonna lord that shit over you guys.
FMK, Fornicate, Marry, Kill, in this case, the Leslie Nielsen edition. And up on the slab, we have The Naked Gun, we have the aforementioned Creep Show, and we have Forbidden Planet. So, Genius, do you want to go first or shall I?
Go for it.
Okay. This one was kind of easy for me, I'm not going to lie.
Okay.
In terms of killing something, the kill has to go to Forbidden Planet. The only reason I'm getting rid of it is it's forbidden. I am not the fan of the lambada. You know, when I realize something is forbidden, the
What about
taboo.
Emperor Hirohito?
I can't pronounce it. I'm not going to do it. Okay. So Forbidden Planet, I'm getting rid of it, killing it, out of the line. We are good to go.
Okay.
Now, I've talked about it before. I think for a relationship to last, I need to laugh. I need someone that's going to give me laughter, someone that we're going to make laughter together. And like we just experienced, all of us, man, nothing makes me laugh harder than Leslie Nielsen as Lieutenant Frank Drebin. I'm going to totally marry the Naked Gun. Why wouldn't I?
Of course.
And I'm going to get freaky as all get out with Creep Show because
He can hold his breath for a long time.
I'm not saying I'm into water sports, but ultimately, when in Rome, and much like a good anthology, variety is the spice of life, my friend.
If you don't like it, just wait a few.
Fluffy, we're going to get freaky with.
Well, there we go.
And then, you know, ultimately, even the racist man at the very end. I'm gonna have my way. I'm gonna have me some fun tonight. Gonna scare the hell out of you. And
Yeah.
you know what? That Jor-El luck, the Jordy Vorel. No, excuse me, Jesus.
Jordy Verrill.
The Verrill luck. Yeah.
BAD bad. Meteor. That's what it's gonna be like. Meteor shit.
You never know that it could be an otherworldly lubricant.
Oh no.
That's why we're getting freaky with it. So
From
there
the-
you go.
From
Those-
the blob to the knob.
Ew, that did definitely cost you extra. Now we need to turn the lights down.
Oh gosh.
And Genius, FMK, Leslie Nielsen.
First, what I'm gonna do? No.
Not the ASMR edition.
It's MRFMK. No, okay, so I'm gonna kill Creep Show as much as it pains me because I love Creep Show. Because one, I'm not down with bugs,
That's
And,
fair.
like,
That's
you know,
fair.
I like my soft animals like fluffy, not like fornicatey and bitey. And like, yeah, he can hold his breath for a long time, but you know, I can't.
Yeah.
So like, and so I'm going to marry Naked Gun because think of all the shenanigans we can get into, like a lifelong full of shenanigans, and like something tells me I'm into something good. Like when we kiss, our feet both go up, you know, and like, you know, practicing safe sex and just like all sorts of stuff.
That is fair.
So yeah, and which means I'm gonna get freaky with Forbidden Planet for two reasons. One, like you said, it's forbidden. Weesh. And if anybody knows about me, yes, taboo, right? And then two, sex bot, you're my sex bot. Because the whole thing about Forbidden Planet was a robot gone rogue, right?
Yep.
And so, like, if you get to freak with a sex bot, dude, with all the attachments and all that kind of stuff, dude, that's awesome. That's like fucking Pleasure Planet 7. So that's what Forbidden Planet is. It's a moon of Mungo, is what it is. And so, like,
Oh man, I almost want to change my answer now. That's good persuasion, my friend.
yeah. And then, it's gonna be awesome.
That's
So,
not too bad.
yeah, that's what I'm gonna
not
do.
too bad. So let us know your FMK there in the chat room. What's going on there? Again, make sure it's nothing too terribly because you don't want to end up being put on a list and having to go door to door.
Wilderness girls.
But we'll be back again next month with our next Monday Mystery Movie Night. And again, now the 3 trailers that we put on, we threw on Rodney Dangerfield's Back to School,
Hey, we're all gonna get laid.
Tobey Hooper's The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and the 1970s dirty classic Summer School Teachers.
I've got really no sound effects for that. I do, but they're gonna be terrible.
Yeah, we don't want to go on that list, actually. But you throw all those 3 together, you will have the film that we're going to be watching and talking about next month. Again, part of the free feed on Nerds and Nostalgia. But
And hopefully we'll see you guys live in the theater here very shortly. But until then, thank you for being part of the Patreon film family.
of course, it is so greatly appreciated. So until the next time, this is Greg.
And I'm Genius McGee.
And it is never too late to get nerdy about nostalgia.
Da-dun, 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 da-dun.